Still in 1957, although we've taken a rapid change here. This is a tune called Lucille by Little Richard, one of the true architects of rock and roll. Again, we've got the great Earl Palmer on drums on this one. And this one is really our first groove that moves towards the straight eighth feel. Because basically Earl Palmer was following Little Richard's left hand, because he was playing like kind of straight eighth notes with the left hand on the piano, and he was basically following that with his right hand on the snare. This is basically like a rock beat, pretty much. If you move the snare part that you're playing on the snare, if you move that to the hi-hat, you'd have like your first kind of straight eighth kind of rock beat. But he's got it happening on the snare, because New Orleans drummers were very fond of the snare, and they were just like on the tune I'm Walking. So if it was on the hi-hat, it'd be regular rock. But because it was on that snare, you didn't realize it. But that's really kind of the turning point, and when things started to become more of the straighter eighth note thing than the I'm Walking thing. Because the I'm Walking thing is really like a 2/4 cut time thing, more of a gospel thing. This is like really the closer to the straight eighth notes. So this just has that fat back thing on 2 and 4 where, it, you know, again on the recording it's hard to tell whether it's a total flam or whether he's hitting it at the same time. But in any case, it's a very driving fat groove. And that was the era when different people in the bands with, you know, people like, you know, Chuck Berry and Muddy Waters and Little Richard and Professor Longhair and all these people, when the straight eight thing started kind of mixing with the tension between some members of the band playing straight eights and some members of the band, Jerry Lee Lewis and stuff, some members playing swing. So that's where you got kind of the beginning of then what we call rock. It was like, oh, which one are we doing here? And they ended up doing both, and it worked. And that eventually led the way for Elvis to do his thing. Part of the key to getting any of these grooves is, you know, the right tools. And I use a stick. It happens to be my own signature stick that Vic Firth makes. I like a stick that has some length to it, but I also like a stick that has a nice smaller bead, because whenever you're playing any of these kinds of styles, you can't have a big heavy-duty bead on there because it's just too clanky. It sounds like you're hitting the side of a van when you're hitting your cymbal. So it's got to have that musical touch where I could play jazz with it, but also it's got to have, you know, enough girth to when I'm rocking, it's got some substantial mass in there. So anyway, the tools of the trade are very important in achieving certain sounds of certain eras, because if you play with a big old heavy rock and roll bead on your stick, it's just never going to sound like a light, bouncy Louis Prima shuffle with that kind of a bead. So sticks matter a lot. This particular groove, Lucille, with the flam, you know, it's not like a total super wide flam, like, you know, it's closer together, but it's not the exact at the same time where you get that pop that's not a flam. It's just a little one, just a hair before. And part of the sloshiness of certain sounds is just the recording itself. Sometimes we think people are playing sloppy when they're not playing sloppy at all. What it is the sound of the snare drums, very tubby and loose. It's the recording itself that gives you the illusion that something's kind of rough and sloppy and slotchety and rickety and crickety and crackety and all the other stuff, when really it's the sonics. It's the mics over, it's the microphone volume too loud, the mic's too close to the drums, and it's kind of overriding, or it's exploding kind of into the diaphragm of the mic, which makes it seem like it's that, you know. So a lot of times when you're listening to these recordings, you have to take all those things into account. The recording itself makes you feel like something's being played that isn't. It's a mystery. It's a secret. Only to be revealed here at vicfirth.com. We're the secret givers, secret makers, secret breakers. Right here. Come to us.
I play for it, baby.